For the last couple of days, we have been debating what the name of our country is. It is at one level a rather bizarre and extraordinary debate because for as long as we can remember, we have sung the words of our national anthem, Bharat Bhagya Vidhata, and also, without thinking, identified ourselves as Indian. Could this change? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. In a few moments from now, we'll be talking to Congress Member of Parliament and CWC member Shashi Tharoor on the ongoing controversy. This on a day when Sonia Gandhi has written to the Prime Minister demanding clarity on what the special session of Parliament is all about. Speculation has been rife that a special resolution could be moved in this 5-day Parliament session that would in some ways give primacy to Bharat as a name for the country over India. This has led to a ferocious debate. The opposition is claiming that it's the name of the alliance, India, that has made the government nervous. The government hasn't suggested the effacing of India. And as we know, Article 1 of the Constitution actually allows for both names, saying very clearly, India, that is Bharat. Could this change? To talk about the politics, the law, the constitutionality, and also whether the opposition might be walking into a trap set for it by the BJP. After all, what else have you heard about in the last 2 days with this story? Let's go across to our guest this evening, Congress leader Shashi Tharoor. It's very good to see you, Shashi. And you had a rather provocative comment. You actually said that it was Muhammad Ali Jinnah who had objected to the name India, that the BJP was echoing in some ways, you suggested, his position. But you also acknowledged simultaneously that both names, India or Bharat, were interchangeable. In that case, why is the opposition making a noise about the fact that the president's invitation to G20 leaders went out as the president of Bharat?
Look, it's very simple, Barkha. I think we are watching the government really being absolutely best at what they do best, which is to change the narrative away from the issues and problems that they have inflicted upon the nation. It's quite amazing, that we've got a list of problems as long as your arm. Sonia Gandhi mentioned 10 or 11 of them in her letter to the Prime Minister. But what happens? You have immediately the appointment of a committee on one nation, one election with the president, former president chairing it. That creates one distraction. Then suddenly there's this whole thing about the president of Bharat, and there's rumors going around that the word India will be struck from the constitution, and there's nothing but that being speculated about on social media and on very many other places. And suddenly what's happening is that instead of worrying about inflation, about unemployment, about spreading hatred in the country, communal violence, all of the issues that have agitated people precisely as we're leading up to the polls, suddenly we have a completely irrelevant series of other issues that the media understandably demands the opposition has a view on. We are obliged to reply, and the net result is the government.
But you're not obliged. You're not obliged. The opposition has reacted with such ferocity to that one invite of the president going out as the president of Bharat. Why did that invite agitate you?
No, look, first of all, we have a very simple formula in the Constitution, which says, Article 1 says India, that is Bharat. In other words, both names are co-equal. And then in the English version of the Constitution, Article 52 says, there shall be a president of India. And in Hindi, it says, Bharat ki Rashtrapati. So essentially, you've got a situation where Bharat is used in Hindi and other Indian languages. We use it in Malayalam, for example. And India is used in English as well as internationally. India is known as India. Our cricket team is called India. I mean, we are India around the world for all intents and purposes. We've built up, as it were, an inestimable brand value for centuries with this name India that we have inherited. In fact, when Nehruji wanted to keep the name India, Jinnah was furious. He wanted India to be the name of both countries collectively, the old British Raj, and that the two countries would be Pakistan and Hindustan. And we were simply not prepared to accept that because we saw ourselves as the successor state to what was known as India around the world, and Pakistan as a seceding state. And so for us, India had value for Nehru. I mean, I was not alive at the time, and nor were you. But Nehruji and the people around him saw great value in preserving that association with India. So India remained in English and Bharat remained in Indian languages. And it's worked perfectly well for 75. Now you suddenly have the president of Bharat. If it was a Hindi language invitation, Bharat ke Rashtrapati invites you, no problem. But when you suddenly put Bharat into an English language invitation, you can see this as something more than just kind of the usual BJP nativism.
But might there be an overreaction somewhere? Because I noticed more carefully today, and to be honest, this had escaped me to this controversy. The G20 logo, if you look at the G20 logo, it actually puts Bharat first and then India, right? There it is, Bharat 2023, India.
But
Today,
as
we
you'll
had a
notice,
very,
Barkha, it says
yes,
Bharat in Hindi in the Devanagari script, and it says India
yes.
in the English language script. So we have no problem with that.
Right. But there was also the announcement of the Prime Minister leaving for Indonesia. And this actually captured, in a way, the dualism of what you're talking about, because it said the Prime Minister of Bharat, but he's gone to attend the ASEAN India Summit.
Exactly. Exactly. We did notice that. And it's part of
Yes.
the many, many contradictions that are going to arise if they persist in using Bharat while using the English language. It's unfortunate and unnecessary, but it's also, frankly, a master distraction. For the last 48 hours, we've hardly had any other issue dominating public attention. And the result of all of this is to put us in a position where we are not able to focus on the issues that really matter to the people of India.
But isn't that your choice? I kind of agree
Nope.
with you that it is a very, from their point of view, from the BJP's point of view, a clever and, as you call it, a master distraction. You don't have to fall for it if you think that's what it is.
No, look, I'm quite happy to never speak about this again. We can end this interview right now. But the problem is
No,
everybody
no,
in the
no,
country
no, no,
is.
no, 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 no.
No,
Everybody's
no,
exercising.
everybody
It's,
in the
yeah.
country is speaking about it. I mean, as you know, I tend to wander onto social media from time to time, and it's
Yes.
the only issue that people are agitated about. So, for us as an opposition party or as opposition parties who relate to the public, for us not to have a view would be odd. And our view is quite simply that we don't need this problem. That honestly, the country has to look at larger and bigger questions.
So, Shashi, it's fair enough to say that, as you know, as the opposition leaders, you have to have a position on this issue. But what is that position? Because the opposition has argued that this is born from the fear of the India alliance, that this is in some ways to cast a kind of cloud or a shadow of doubt over the name India. But we have no proof yet that the word India is being effaced or erased or replaced.
Well, I guess that's what they want to keep us waiting to until the session of Parliament to see what sort of resolution they introduce or what sort of bill or amendment or whatever they try to bring in. I mean, the fact is they've got us speculating about this because don't forget when the opposition adopted the name India Alliance, there was a ferocious reaction from the government and the ruling party. There was astonishment when the Prime Minister, who is, after all, the author of names like Startup India, Digital India, Make in India, and so on, suddenly started saying India is associated with Indian Mujahideen and terms like that. And then you had the RSS chief, Mr. Bhagwat, saying stop using India and only speak of Bharat. And then a couple of days later, you have this invitation from the Republic of the President of the Republic of Bharat. So, the logic seems, unfortunately, to be heading in one direction, that they want to move away from the use of the name India. Now, as I say, this is most unfortunate because there's great brand value around the world with the name India, but it's also something that would cause an extraordinary and unnecessary expense to change and to lose. And why should we, when we've actually given so much content and meaning to the word India and it's associated with so many special achievements and precious moments in our history? Why on earth would we want to abandon it? Why can't we continue what was working perfectly well, which is India in English and Bharat in Indian languages? It's not a problem.
Do you think that if the words are used interchangeably, which is what your friend and the Foreign Affairs Minister Jaishankar has argued today, that look, these are interchangeable words. So just because you mix up the English and the Hindi, it's no big deal. Would you agree with that? As long as both words remain, it doesn't really matter how they use the President of Bharat, the Prime Minister of Bharat, should be fine. Do you think it's fine?
Well, look, I mean, it's not as big a deal if they do continue to use them interchangeably. But my frustration with all of this is we had a working system. In Hindi, you say Bharat ke Rashtrapati. In English, you say the President of India or the Prime Minister of India. And that's also eliminates confusion in the minds of the rest of the world. If suddenly you're India sometimes and Bharat sometimes, you come across like one of these teenage adolescents who's having an identity crisis. It's silly.
Teenage adolescents that's having an identity crisis, whereas the BJP would argue that this is a moment which is reclaiming India's grand civilizational roots. Two
Yeah,
very
but
different
those
perspectives, right?
civilizational roots were never lost, Barkha. They didn't need to be reclaimed. They've been there from the start of the constitution. I mean, they've been there in popular discourse. They've been there in every Indian language. They've been there in poetry, in the national anthem, as you rightly pointed out, in the verses of Subramanya Bharati in Tamil, in the verses of poets in every Indian language. Practically, what's lost? Nothing was lost. Nothing needed reclaiming.
So you think it's childish? You think it's an adolescent? It's behaving like a teenager who's trying to find the meaning of life at the age 30.
Yeah, at a certain point in life, you've got to be a secure person, and the same in the life of a nation. It reeks of insecurity to be obsessed with things like the names of cities and countries and places, of constantly having to reassert yourself. If you're a big, mature country, you can live with the past. You can live with the iniquities of the past, what went wrong, the history of it, because it's in the past. You are focused on the future. Rather than rename old cities, build new ones and give them the names you like. Create a future. I mean, that's what mature people and mature nations do.
I would agree with you, but your party compatriot Manishankar Iyer wants you to call Connaught Place Rajiv Chowk. It's not as if you
No,
guys
no.
haven't done this.
Look, I mean, I wasn't around and I wasn't in Indian politics when all that happened, though I must say, to the best of my knowledge, most people still speak of CP rather
Yeah.
than RC. So, I mean, there are certain things, there's a certain comfort and familiarity with doing things the way you've always been used to doing. And the same applies to the use of the name India and to the names of many other places. So I just think it's, of course, in a generation, it'll change. Everyone's now more or less saying Chennai, whereas my generation would have said Madras for the longest time and Bombay for the longest time. I went to school in Bombay. But yes, that was a mischievous tweet I issued today, saying that if
Yeah.
indeed the government is so concerned about the name India, we should call ourselves the Alliance for Betterment, Harmony, and Responsible Advancement for Tomorrow, which should also be the Alliance for Bharat. What better?
Was this humorous, or are you half serious there? That let's just rename the India Alliance Bharat and then
No,
see what the government does.
it's just a joke, Barkha. I've been unleashing a few of these once in a while when my self-restraint collapses. I issued Chuck Day India with India in caps, and that's done rather well as well. I mean, the fact is that
Yeah.
these. I mean, the issue is so silly; it deserves a certain amount of silly treatment. So it
But,
was
but
meant
you
to be a
know,
joke.
you're joking. We had Akshay Kumar, no longer Canadian, actually changing the
Oh, really?
tagline of his movie. Yeah, he's no longer Canadian, and he also changed the tagline of his movie. His upcoming movie was called "The Great Indian Rescue," and it's now called "The Great Bharat Rescue."
Well, that's another mystery. What is the adjective of Bharat in English? I mean, we know Bharatiya in Hindi and so on, but what is it going to be in English? Is it going to be, are we Bharatans? Are we Bharatis? What are we in English? Because the fact is, it's not the Great Bharat Rescue. It was not the Great India Rescue. It was the Great Indian Rescue. So what is it going to be? Is it the Great Bharati Rescue? See how silly we already begin to sound? I mean, the entire thing is quite preposterous, Marka.
Let's talk a little
In
bit
fact,
before we
there are
zoom out.
there are some nasty things going around, by the way, saying that are you all going to be bar rats because Bharat and no one is trying to say Bharati or Bharatiya or Bharatan or anything. So are you going to be Bharats? Bharats, said somebody from abroad.
But the BJP would argue that this is actually you missed a cultural moment here. That this is about our civilizational history. This is about pushback against the Angrezi-speaking elites like yourself. This is a pushback against the sort of Saint Stephen subculture. This is the deracinated Indian being shown his place. This moment.
Why does the deracinated Indian need to actually speak English in that case? Why does the racinated Indian, not the deracinated one, need to worry about the English language or about what foreigners are going to call us and so on? I mean, look, there is a precedent of some other countries doing this. Ceylon became Sri Lanka, and Myanmar became Burma became Myanmar, and so on. There are many other examples, but we were above that. I thought we were above that. Clearly, the truth is we're not, judging by what's going on. And we will wait to see what the government brings into Parliament, whether it's a resolution or a constitutional amendment, whether they really want to amend the Constitution, as some are suggesting, to drop the reference to India altogether. and to change every reference to India to a reference to Bharat. In which case, they better think of
Well, the
of a
BJP, the
description.
BJP ministers today have suggested that these are interchangeable phrases. So I don't think India is going to be self-effaced.
All
Rather,
right.
is going to be
In that
effaced.
case, there's no problem because we've all been interchangeably using them anyway. Except that in English you say Indian, and in Indian languages you say Bharat, which we'll continue to do quite happily. I hope we don't go the route of actually dropping the actual use of India. So if it's going to be using both and using them internationally and interchangeably, salute. Let's move on. Let's talk about inflation. Let's talk about unemployment. Let's talk about the spreading toxin of communal poison in this country. Let's talk about Manipur. Let's talk about everything that this government doesn't want to talk about.
Yeah. Let me just ask you though, because I think the Jinnah story is not one that many people know, and I want to just take you back to it briefly. You said that Jinnah actually did not want India to be seen as a successor state to the British, but there's also some lazy talk about India being a colonial nomenclature. It's not. It actually derives
No.
itself from the Sindhu River. It goes back to the time of the Greeks. From Sindhu, Indus, Hindos. There have been many variations along
That's
the
right. So
decades and the
The
centuries.
Persians started it, I think, and the Greeks used that Persian formulation. When Alexander came, he was accompanied by a historian at the time, so they all wrote about India and Indus, and then that word remained in the lexicon throughout. So that Columbus went looking for India and found America, but he called the people the Indians because he thought he'd found India. Indonesia is named also as the islands of India, etc., etc. So you've got this whole notion of India going back absolutely a couple of thousand years. I think the first usage of India or versions thereof, Indica, Indus, and so on, is about over 2,000 years ago. So there's no question of giving the British any credit for that either.
You
they
you
just use
you
they
you've
just
been a
use the phrase,
diplomat.
the word that was around.
You've been a diplomat before you were a politician, right? As G20 is about to kick off, the world is arriving in the capital, and we are having this big debate over what our country's name is. How do you think that's playing out for diplomats right now?
No, honestly, I think it's a most unfortunate debate to be having, and not just because the G20 is here. The rest of the world is noticing the big articles in the Western papers already, in the international papers about is India going to change its name. It just makes us look absolutely juvenile. I hope that we will stop this and we'll focus on what really matters. In the G20, there's a pretty Herculean effort going on the part of the Indian diplomats to rescue the possibility of a joint communique, which almost certainly looks impossible now because of the vast gap between countries on the Ukraine, on how to refer to Ukraine, whether to refer to Ukraine at all, what the reference should be if it is there, etc. And there's also some genuine issues of other contested areas and questions of debt and international trade and women in development and so on, where the Chinese, for some reason, have been taking positions that have been not exactly friendly to the consensus we're trying to bring about. So it's a tough job for our diplomats, and I'd much rather they focused on that than on whether they're Indian diplomats or Bharatiya diplomats.
Let's zoom out a bit to the larger politics. Sonia Gandhi, as you mentioned, made a list of 9 issues that she said Parliament should be talking about. The Parliamentary Affairs Minister has said it's traditional to not actually reveal or talk about the agenda of Parliament in public before a session. That's the first point. The second point
That's
is
not
the
true.
opposite. Go ahead.
That's not true, Barkha. I mean, every time you call a special session, you normally announce why. The last special session that was summoned was to adopt the GST. It was known in advance that we're
Yeah.
going to have a session to roll out the GST. There was a special session in our time to mark the 60th anniversary of Parliament. It was announced for that. It took place on a Saturday and Sunday. I spoke. I mean, we all knew what it was all about, so we could prepare for that session. This is pretty much the first time in living memory that you're having a special session convened without an agenda, and no one knows what we're there to discuss. That too is part of the one more weapon of mass distraction that this government likes to use.
Weapon of mass distraction is a clever turn of phrase, but words have got the certain sections of the opposition alliance into trouble. And I'm talking, of course, about Udaynidhi Stalin likening the Sanatana Dharma to a disease. And this has actually set the cat among the pigeons in the opposition alliance, the Congress speaking in multiple voices, opposition leaders speaking in multiple voices. If you look at this moment from the BJP's perspective, they are once again clubbing this Bharat versus India debate with the Sanatana Dharma comments by Stalin's son, and then raising that old familiar trope, hey, the Congress and others are anti-Hindu.
Look, I mean, it's simply not true. And as you know, many congressmen have also taken a different stand. There is a history
What is your stand? What is your stand?
my stand is well known. I've published a book about it. I am very much a believer in Hindu Dharma and in the rich philosophical traditions of Hinduism. I think it's a definitional issue. I think for many in Tamil Nadu, and particularly for those of the DMK persuasion, Sanatana Dharma only is a code word for casteism and Brahminism. That's what they understand by it, and they reject it from the days of Periyar and so on, and that's been their stand consistently. But for most of us in the country, Sanatana Dharma doesn't only mean casteism. I'm one of those Hindus who doesn't believe in the caste system, but who believes in the soaring majesty of the
I mean,
philosophical inquiries
you
of
wrote a
Hinduism.
book. You wrote a book
Yeah,
called Why I'm a Hindu, right? Now,
exactly,
my question
exactly.
is, as the author of that book, were you disturbed by Udinidhi Stalin's comments?
No, I would be disturbed if I didn't know that this is all he means. And indeed, he subsequently clarified that's all he meant, is that indeed for them, in rejecting, when they say they reject or wish to eradicate Sanatana Dharma, what they mean is they want to eradicate casteism. It's just a very unfortunate turn of phrase because it's given the BJP handle, as it were, to beat us with. But the truth is that that's all that has traditionally been there from the DMK side, that they abhor and reject casteism, and they identify the phrase Sanatana Dharma with the perpetuation of inequality, casteism, Brahminism, and so on, which they reject.
Okay, final question. The opposition claims that the India alliance has made the BJP nervous. What is the evidence to suggest this? Because at least so far, the survey suggests that Mr. Modi and the BJP certainly have the upper hand as we enter election season of 2024.
Well, look, on this question of who has the upper hand, I think the people will decide. It's not really a question
Right.
because, I mean, we discovered, for example, that the poll that got the most publicity, the India Today C voter poll, was entirely conducted on telephone. Well, thank you. I mean, how many people amongst the so-called Aam Aadmi community were reached in this process? No one really knows. Telephone polls have major limitations in the Indian context. And so I think it's very clear that there is a large level of discontent and unhappiness in the country, which I think is reflected in much of the government's behavior, conduct, and even levels of panic that we're seeing in recent months. So my own view is that it's going to be a close election. It's very much a contested election. The BJP did very well in 2019, but perhaps too well in many states, so they will not be able to replicate. When you look at a time in which, of course, the BJP had every single seat in Rajasthan, every single seat in Haryana, all but one seat in Madhya Pradesh, all but one seat in Chhattisgarh, all but one seat in Bihar, this kind of thing. I mean, it's very, very difficult to imagine them repeating that. Where are they going to gain seats for the ones they're going to lose? It's a tough question for them to answer. I think it's looking like a much closer contest, and with the opposition united, it's no longer going to be whether Congress is going to get more seats than the BJP. It's going to be whether the India Alliance gets more seats than the NDA Alliance, and the NDA Alliance is essentially just the BJP. The allied parties in the NDA are ciphers for the most part. So I think we're looking at a very close context, Barkha, and in this context, we are gearing up for a very substantive and serious debate.
Well, let's
Not one
see what
about
actually
these
happens.
side issues. Sorry?
We don't. I know. I'm just saying we don't actually even know what the parliament debate is going to be about. If there is a debate, it doesn't have a question now. We believe, so we have to just wait and see.
That's right.
A master distraction you call it, but one that has the opposition, extremely exercised. Just from the name India Alliance, you think that's what's the anxiety trigger, or are you arguing that it's the opposition coming together?
I think it's all of that. I mean, certainly the choice of the name was a masterstroke, to use one of the BJP's favorite expressions for their own boss. And at the same time, it has been remarkable that in Patna and then in Bangalore and then in Mumbai, you've seen a tremendous convergence of a growing number of parties. In Mumbai, there was a report of 6 small parties asking whether they can join the alliance too. So suddenly you've got this tremendous mahal, as it were, growing around the question of opposition unity. And that leads people to think that there is going to be tremendous scope, I think, in our country for a genuine alternative to the government we've been having for the last 9.5 years. That's what's, I think, got the government of India terribly worried and the ruling party terribly worried.
And I noticed you said the government of India. Well, we just have to wait another couple of weeks to see whether whether there's any
Caught my
merit to
mischief
this.
as soon as I did.
Of course, I don't miss the detail of anything, I should hope. Thank you, Shashi Tharoor, for talking to us. Always a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Barkha.
Thank you.
All the best. Good talking to you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.